welcome to our symposium. Just a few reminders. If you want to know the program of the board assigned with all the notes of how the process of today will unfold. We also have rules or rules of do not forget that. In case you forget, you can also go outside of the board and find yourself. For now, I'll ask that you put your phones on silent. It's very important. In case you already forgot. My name is Mzwake Dani, member of CCIVS, the committee and a member of SAVWA. I'll be facilitating together with the state. It's a pleasure and an honor all the time. What's wrong with the mic? Sorry. Can I have those? It's an honor, of course. We are formally starting with the space, and I would like to have on stage Mr. Rutherford, the president of the CCIVS. With a round of applause.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're all doing fine, and let me take this opportunity to welcome you. It is a privilege to welcome you to this symposium, which is focusing on social justice. Today, we came together to confront interconnected issues of environmental decline and social inequality. By engaging in the International Voluntary Service, we can foster positive transformation, work towards more equitable and sustainable future. I just want to invite you, ladies and gentlemen, let us invite in discussion, in dialogue, and explore strategies to advance collective objectives. This event underscores the strength of our teamwork, which will be built for years, and highlights the importance of diverse perspectives and diverse voices from around the world. I think this is a very good example. You see the room, the color in the room, we are very diverse. And in our way to farewell, we are delighted to have you here to share our panel of experts to be joining us shortly. We are delighted to have you so that we can share our experience, your insight, and help us share our common goals. Let us begin this regular discussion with hopes that our conversation will have a meaningful and impactful change. Thank you very much for being part of this important dialogue. And before I give the mic to someone, I just also want to give a brief history of CCIVS, because we have our members who are members of CCIVS or who are participating in this for the first time. So, yeah, CCIVS stands for the Coordinated International Voluntary Service, created in 1948. You know, soon after the Second World War, there are a lot of organizations that are trying to do voluntary service, they are coordinated. So organizations said that we must have something which coordinates, bring us all together. That's why CCIVS was formed. And it's a strong Europe, but they're partners from all over the world. We are one of the most unknown network in the world. We have our presence in trust. Go to any country, most countries, you find this CCIVS members, but we are very much known. But we have the reason why we do that is because we have very strong key values. Some of our key values is voluntarism. This International Voluntary Service is a double-edged sword. Then community development and promote the culture of peace. And you know this is expensive. And what a lot of people want to talk about this because it takes some of the lives here. So that's one of our key core values. We also believe in solidarity, where people who are oppressed around the world, who are taught under apartheid, and we talk about this strongly. It's one of our key values. We also believe in the values, we also believe in social justice, we also believe in sustainability and global citizenship. So on that positive note, I just want to thank you and I just want to invite you so that we can enjoy the day, interact, make friends, let us know each other better. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, President, for those opening remarks. As we move forward, I would like to have speaking on the objectives and the relevance of this.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for being here today. So I'm just going to talk a bit about what this project is. So actually is the first collaboration between the CCIVS and the International Music Council. We have been neighbours for many, many years in UNESCO. We're both networks which were created by UNESCO in 48. You guys are 49? Yeah. So yeah, we've been friends for a long time, and the idea was that well, we wanted to do something with voluntary service and music, and of course, having our neighbours there, we were like, let's do something together. So we came up with this project, which is about using music as storytelling in order to advocate for what we want. Because as we know, bureaucrats often are in charge of making decisions about everyone without actually living in the place, without actually knowing about anything about what they're talking about. So we wanted to have the voices of the community come out and for them to be heard. So this was the point of the project, and to be able to do this through music. So the idea is it connects grassroots activism with institutional advocacy, ensuring that local realities inform global decision making through the decolonial approach to social and climate justice. Just move on. So the idea of this symposium, so other people will explain what we've done so far. But the idea of this symposium is really to share with you the updates about what we have been doing. We want to show the results so far. This is really nice results which will follow on from me. And so we will premiere the song. And we also want to have knowledge sharing. So we invited people to come from outside so we can learn from you, and we can also integrate these ideas into our future plan of action and the future work that we'll be doing. This is really important space for us to learn together, to grow together, to be able to share together. So with that, I will pass the floor to Davide Grosso from the International Music Council.
Good morning, everyone. And, I think Vicky has said that we were so happy that for the first time we could do this project together. And I'm very proud and happy to present you the song that was co-written by some very beautiful and brilliant minds. Before, I launch the song, I just want to say that some of them are here. Teddy is here, Anna is here, Raksha is here. But please stand up just for a second. Raksha, Hannah, Teddy, Vicky, Vicky is there. Ian is somewhere in the room. So we will explain later how this came together, but I'm very proud to present this song and the official video, Echoes of Nature. Thank you very much.
Like humans, but also the nature. The V stands for all of us together.
Tried to make some rhymes, but we couldn't finish it. Something like Riggy, Are we listening?
Make it slow.
I'm gliding underwater, looking at the boats. They remind me of a time when our shores was not a plastic code. I wonder if the animals that walk on 2 feet know that deep down we have the same heartbeat. Deep down, deep down, deep down, we have the same heartbeat. Sing for the earth. Hope is my ally. Stand with your people. Active and alive. Start from yourself. Hope is my ally. Let's make it safe. Active and alive.
under the ocean, fast on the glaciers, voices are traveling together. Ngozi sikelele Africa, Ngozi sikelele Australia, Ngozi sikelele Asia, Ngozi sikelele, Ngozi sikelele, Ngozi sikelele America, Ngozi sikelele Europa, Ngozi sikelele Africa. Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Ubuntu. I am 'cause we are.
Sing for the earth.
Hope is my ally.
Stand with your people.
Active and ally.
Start from yourself.
Hope is my ally.
Let's make a change.
Active and ally. Bajan del norte con logos y promesas, llenan las aguas de mercurio y tristeza, compran gobiernos, compran la ley, el bosque se quema y tú pensando que es ok.
The story they told us was never ours. Why poison the rivers and sell us the kiwa for profit of wreckage that we endure. Hectares in power, them are burning the land. Stop burning land, stop burning future, stop burning land, stop burning future.
Echo says a crime and we bear witness. The planet rebels, gives no forgiveness. Echo says a crime and we bear witness. The planet rebels, gives no forgiveness.
Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry?
Thank you for the enthusiasm. I just want to also thank to the organization that was hosting us, AESO, which is here. And as you can see, there's made by this guy here, Sydney. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. It's a great work that keeps on increasing the magnitude of work. When you are in volunteers, please, various ways of and always need to be led. So we are hoping the sum of this video will convey a message that is comprehensive to the whole world. What kind of content? Now, for our next speaker is Anthea Harden, who's part of the United Nations Voluntary Service Africa Coordinator, who will give us just a bit on the intersection of culture and around.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was a video. Thank you. I'll download it. For myself. Good morning. God is great family. Along with the I acknowledge the presence of the other esteemed international and regional partners. I also extend a warm welcome to our youth, students, activists, researchers, and authors, and like to thank the UN for protocols of birth. Yes, today I'm standing here very profound to honor, and I'm really honored to be here today with you, amongst our change makers, amongst those who's not only volunteering, but also who supported us with environmental justice as we are here standing together. At first, these themes are different, but music, volunteerism, and environmental action, they share a single heartbeat connection. Connection to one another, to our histories, and to the earth that sustains us. So music has always been an instrument of truth and transformation. It gives rhythm to resistance and
and the voice to liberation. From our freedom songs to indigenous chants, music has always been a way to form of entertainment. It heals, mobilizes, and reminds us of who we are. Similarly, volunteering. I read the word Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. Not only across Africa, but I mean globally, volunteers for bridges, it advances climate action, it's a youth empowerment tool, and also explains inclusion. Much like the UNB program, what we see is that young, not only Africans, but globally, women and professionals lending their skills and voices to accelerate the SDG goal, which is the transformation of and compassion into concrete change. But to achieve environmental justice, we must decolonize our thinking and our practices, which means that today we need to recognize ecological crises that are linked to our history, our resources, our knowledge, and their potential. Decolonizing is not only about restoring balance, also to restore the value of our wisdom, enhance our traditional knowledge, and community-led innovation. It's about shifting from aid to agency as well as from transformation to liberation. We volunteers into our communities as partners, they not only help to build trust, but they also build solidarity. We always say that volunteerism is the bridge between global expertise and local realities, ensuring that action for people and the planet is not only green, but also just. Today and here, music and volunteering lead the most beautiful, it's a beautiful stir to the soul. It not only inspires, but it also inspires. Volunteers in turn turns empathy to action, and together it creates a harmony of social and ecological justice. As we move forward under the 20th agenda, let us empower not only our volunteers and our youth, but also our partners, our educators, and environmental defenders to lead this process of transformation. So, may we continue to sing, serve, and stand together for an Africa and globally that is sustainable, sovereign, and just. And may our collective songs be one of resilience, restoration, and hope. I thank you.
So much to our keynote speaker for the profound words. We are in these movements, not only because we want to make the world green, but also just. Thank you for those words. Now I am handing over to take us through some videos and oh, you want to go together?
The song is one of our albums, and we're going to get from the actual participants at the first slide. There are the various other aspects of the project, actually still ongoing. So I wrote off to Rex. You can explain more about how we got to where we are today.
Also, Ian needs to explain it.
Where's Ian?
Hello everyone, my name is Raksha. I'm from India, representing the CCIVS Youth Committee, but I also represent India. So it's nice to have you all here. I would just like to highlight what our keynote speaker just said, that music has always been a way for hope, entertainment, and a reminder for who we are. So that's why one of the highlights that we wanted our music video to have was Ubuntu, the philosophy of Ubuntu, I am because we are. But I would also like to share more about the procedure or the process that we went through to get to the music video. It was not an easy process. A lot of people were involved. So the whole process, it began When the project started with a need assessment survey, where the form was shared with all the across the IBS network to the member organizations, where we were trying to get insights, answers for like discussion points during the GRM, which is the Global Reflection Meeting. So what is the Global Reflection Meeting? Like the name suggests, it's an international space to reflect, reimagine, and strategize ideas. It happened in Versailles from 6th to 14th April, where 28 participants across the network participated. There were like coordinators from the organization, experts from International Music Council, youth activists, the Secretariat of CCIVS, the Executive Committee. So it was intergenerational, multicultural, multilingual space. And while it happened, it was to strengthen the ideas through collective reflection, to understand, to deepen our understanding of advocacy, decolonization, and solidarity. So these were the key themes that we discussed. It was a 1 week training, 1 week phase. So lots of points were discussed. We reflected on IBS need assessment and talked shortly about what happened there. We also discussed the history of IBS, because when we want to look at our future, we also have to reflect on our past and then come to the present and then think about what will happen in the future. So we also discussed we did a SWOT analysis on certain topics that were part of it. If you want to know in details what happened, you can also just go to our website. There is the GRM report, and you will find in detail presentation of topics that were discussed. And in the NSP survey, we had a presentation made of the need assessment survey that was shared, where over 70 participants from 42 different countries participated. They were all part of our network, IBS network, and through the survey, we got to know that IBS organizations, like the network, people working in the network, think that they lack recognition, because it was like an irony, because IBS started where we never thought about getting recognition. We do it from our heart, but now we are in a point where we feel that it's needed, that we have to have recognition for it to thrive longer. So it was something that came up during the discussion. And we also talked about funding problems that the organization face, and that it needs to be more inclusive and not just focus on a certain age group, but also adapt to the changing world, because it's not the same throughout our lifetime. And after that, we moved on, we went back to our home countries, we reflected more about what had happened. And we did it shortly after, we did a 2-day online training, which was also part of the PhD project. It was led by Francisco Valdini, and he used a method called No Significant Change. It happened online because it's not hard, it's not easy to get all the people in physically in a place to do the trainings. So it happened like twice, once a week, and there we learned how to collect the stories. So it was the stories of challenges, where it was directly related to the local communities, because we wanted to know the grassroots issues that bother our people, our communities. And this was used as a base for the training that happened in Kenya, which my colleagues here will talk more about. And later, after the training, the other part of the impact measurement training was done, which is the stories of change, because we had our local actions. So we wanted to see if the things we did actually impacted the local communities. So I'll just pass on the mic to my colleagues here to talk more about the Kenyan training.
Thank you so much. My name is Linus Omonti. I'm from Kenya Voluntary Service Organization. We're the ones who hosted this great project. We had amazing people amazing musicians, amazing songwriters. It was just a market. It was music, for you to see this last video, for you to see this last product, it has gone through a lot of engineering and all that. So I myself am a musician. But this time I decided to guide together with my colleague, the leader and all the others, so that we would see how the young people would bring out this song. So I think it would be also very important. I think we had a lot of people who sang, but one of them who we never met, never seen, is here. Make it please. Stand up and come. You have the floor. You have the floor. One. Yeah. And think you do one was. You just want to come to talk. Yes.
See, I'm driving underwater, looking at the boats. They remind me over time when I shows was not a busted cold. I wonder if the animals that walk on 2 feet know that deep down we have the same heartbeat. Yeah.
So we had a lot of people who helped us also with the songwriting team. So thank you so much, everyone who participated in this project. Also thank you people who had the time and the opportunity to sing the song. I think I will pass it over to David, who is from the International Music Council, who helped us also with creating and marketing this music that we together. So give it up.
Thank you. Yes, so it was a process, as Vicky briefly mentioned, the International Music Council, which is a network of music organizations, needs that we believe for a world where everybody can express, learn, enjoy, participate in music life, and where artists of every kind are very remunerated and recognized. So we are pretty much like you, a value-based organization. And so when we received this invitation from CCIVS, we just jumped on it because this is not our usual like ecosystem. So we moved into a different ecosystem, but we really felt that these two ecosystems go together. And for the training, I credited, I mentioned a lot of people, but there is one key person without which we couldn't have done this song, who is a professional songwriter from Kenya, check name, Guido, who plays very badly on this picture. But the process is actually, I mean, now you're seeing this video, it's fine. But imagine this 20 plus people from all over the world coming together with their culture, with their language, having gone through stories, through the process, and trying to get together to write one song and to agree on one text and one lyric. It was pretty challenging, but we are very happy, and also that's okay because we were co-facilitating this. Challenging to us. It turns out that we started as like a group of people, strangers, and we went through this process and we arrived at the song we are just seen, which actually not the end of the process, but it's actually it was the beginning of another process because all the partners in the Voices for Change project have then wrote some to their local community, and they used this song to do what we call local actions, but it's really to bring the song to use music as a tool for social change in their communities. And I think now I'm very happy to introduce another premiere of another video which will give you very little idea because what they have done is just amazing.
No problem. No, no, no.
What was?
Yeah.
Ah. Yeah. Hello, good morning. So I'm very happy to speak the floor to each representative of the partner organization. I invite all of them to join me on stage, please. So they can actually quickly tell us what they've done, why. And then I have a surprise. Hello, everybody. Good morning. And my name is Silvio Cusco. I come from Italy, from the organization Cantiere Germany. And here you see some picture of the local action we talked in end of July, beginning of August, in two of the most significant places to the local community in my country, my village, which are youth center and refugee asylum seeker center. Which are in Santa Maggiore and Gurmonevano in northern Pretoria. In the first picture, you can see all the people hanging out at the youth center, plus the neighbors, plus all the people from the local community that we managed to involve in this process. And basically, what we do? We make this street of umbrellas. We just take old and broken umbrellas from a shop and repair them and use them to have some shadow in this part of the youth center because you see, we are plunged in, as you can see from the picture, cement and concrete all around our youth center. So this part of the youth center cannot be used during summer. It reaches a temperature of 35, 36 degrees that become 41, 42 perceived. So the kids just have to us to have some shelter for the staff. So we involve those local community doing this, and those are roof gardens. The second part that you can see the asylum seeker center, refugee center, which we make this trial. We try to involve not only local community, international volunteers, local volunteers, but also the hosts of the asylum seeker center, the refugees, the former refugees, the migrants that attend the island class for migrants. And what we do is just to repaint and rebuild the place. So it can be more pleasant for people that are going to stay here for a period of their life, and also to create a small garden of memories, planting planting plants that are dear to people and coming from their hometown. So that's it.
Good morning. I'm Ragnar from EACEA.
Yeah.
The local action. This picture talks about the university student. We have run this program local action in the university Rampur, where 40 university students and 12 faculties have participated. And the worker volunteers from France were on a sanitation mission. They have presented their project to the university student and also presented the European Green Deal. That was a big motivation for the university student in India, that particular university. They got to know how countries contribute to the UN agenda on climate justice. And thereafter, the song was played, the local song was played, because of some play. And that has generated great idea about the best about how to safeguard the sea turtles, the working sea turtle conservation project, and promote environmental activism. And the university students have formed their group to start their own action in their university and also in the community. This is how this action happened. They got to know about what is this BFC project is all about. The second action, you have seen the tree here, the reflection tree. This action happened in Manchester. Again, it's for a community gathering where 68 people participated, including 44 university students and faculties. Using Aurora's music video, the scene, participants explored how music sparks environmental activism. Discussion then turned on to decolonization, decolonizing the mind, access, and expertise and ethical ecology through throughput and case studies. Finally, through the reflection-free model, the participants share their takeaways, vision for the planet Earth, and reflections inspired by the song Acres of Nature. Thank you.
I will try to be short and sweet. So the first photo you can see on the picture is from our first session where we hosted the workshop, the workshop that actually had 4 different continents at the same room. So it was beautiful. And we started with the mapping and activity called Environmental Passport, when we tried to link that actually coming from the 4 different continents, we have quite similar issues, and the dynamics from global south and global north are pretty much visible in all our activities. And the second picture that you can see, we asked our participants after having spent 3 days with them, and after having 14 days of the topic throughout the workshop, if they can turn into local action on their own. So their initiative was to cooperate with local drawer, and they decided to draw a wall in the small meteor path. And you can see the bubbles on the wall, and they decided to create a wall with bubbles and write word water in each of their respective languages.
Thank you.
Yeah? Okay. No, it's you.
Thank you very much. I want to appreciate all the presenters here also and all the people that are training us today. So in SAVWA, we explored 3 projects, the global Excel project that we did. One of them was the construction work camp with the digital protection. So those that are extending that, we will take also the place that we operate. I think with the global Excel group, we EACEA, EACEA, Olosho, Manere. These are some of the team members that are with our projects that we did, and the 25 of them that we are sending out to local ECD. Then we're going to be doing gardening projects, various experts, local experts in the community where they live. So that's what so it's a long process, and we evaluate them for the next 6 months, and then we're going to be taking those experts also back into their local community. So with this project, actually, we seeing a long run, not only now as we're doing this now, but we're looking at the future. These are the young people that are supposed to be our community this time. I don't know if I left it.
Good morning, everybody. This picture from Palestine, the first one, it's a workshop that local action that we did in with the participation of teenagers from the 2 refugee camps in Bethlehem and young people who live inside the apartheid border between Bethlehem and the workshop included showing basic skills about the climate change and climate justice and how the young people can really help their communities back to the refugee camps and by the world, how to really work on better environmental situation. Because we have the problem of collecting the garbage. The other one actually is the conclusion of when we concluded our 1 day work camp, Green Day in the whole city of Hebron for the marginalized and excluded communities in the whole city of Hebron, in participation in cooperation with our local partner center that belongs to the Palestinian Red Crescent, where we had the participation of 57 young women and their children to park in the Green Day where they plant trees and flowers in their neighborhood and in the center itself. It went very well. Unfortunately, we did not participate in the Kenya songwriting because at that time all the lights were just for the release due to the war. So we were unable. So we played some Palestinian music that actually donated the Thank you.
Hello, I'm Elena from Lega Ambiente Italy. This was our local action in Ottaviano, south of Italy. The first picture you can see, we were presenting the project, change to community members and professional volunteers. And in the second picture, we're taking to music workshops that we organized together with Antonio, the other artist trained in Kenya. Thank you. Hello, Anna from Pretoria, from NGO. And in the Voices of Change workshops in Estonia, project participants Catherine Gates and Annette Elizabeth, the grounding exercises share storytelling circles and discussions on decolonizing ecology to help young people to rethink climate challenges. Through creating and sharing dialogue, participants found new ways to inspire change in their communities.
Hello everyone, my name is Juliana Vaca and I am from Fundación Chiriboga in Ecuador. We did 2 local actions. The first picture is from our first local action, and it was about sustainable agriculture in the cloudy forest of one cloudy forest in Ecuador. And so we have all the volunteers that help us run that activity. And I wanted to share this picture from our second local action because it's really important for us. It was an opportunity to change not only the lives of the communities that we were cleaning the beach in, but also the life of a group of indigenous people from the Amazonian, Ecuador. So they were able to come from the Amazon region to the coast region, and it was their first and unique chance to meet the sea and the ocean and know other people's problems and other challenges for environment. So it was an impact in our lives as well.
Thank you so much. Our project was in Kakamega Forest, the hugest forest in East Africa. And it's also a remnant, the Great Northern Forest. So we decided to take the volunteers there. We had a lot of volunteers where they were working with the community to restore the forest because the people from this community also love the forest. We tried to work with them to show them the need to preserve this forest because the reason why this project Voices of Change was found was to use music to promote environmental conservation. If you see any part of Africa, when you produce music and dance and pass a message, it flows easily. So we used the message of the community to protect, preserve, and conserve the Kakamega forest. And also the community is known by a very popular dance. It's under the Erasmus dance, which is a very, very vibrant dance. And then we also used our song Voices for Change. So, thank you.
I think from Turkey, representing GSM, Change Symposium, I thought that we were told that we are going to have half an hour each. So there are 3 photos here. First of all, we had so much fun, although we were talking about very difficult issues, because we were talking about climate justice. It was very, very difficult time to time. But fortunately, we had the song, and we had translated it into Turkish. But at the same time, some of our friends who knew the deaf alphabet, they sang it in Turkish and in deaf alphabet. And so you're going to see in the video later how much fun we had because we had a choreographer. And that's all. Thank you.
I cannot stop to be amazed about the amazing work that you've done, and thank you for me to remind us also that having fun is also a good way to bring music and to also talk about sometimes challenging things. Now, I'm very happy to show you readings of what I presented you at the very beginning, hoping that this time we just play.
hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry?
I'm gliding underwater, looking at the boats. They remind me of a time when our shores was not a plastic coat. I wonder if the animals that walk on 2 feet know that deep down we have the same heartbeat.
Che ca natura formată, nu l-am transformată în simată vândat. Șchiavă che ca nu stessa am creat. Stamma sic, stamma asciutta, coca non levo setto. Guartino renar che ste tiene come me. Per me non morisi se che niente pure colpa mia. Deep down, deep down, deep down, we have the same heartbeat. Sing for the earth. Hope is my ally. Stand with your people. Active and alive. Start from yourself. Hope is my ally. Let's make it safe. Active and alive.
Our voices are traveling together, above the clouds, through the trees, under the ocean, past on the glaciers. Voices are traveling together. Voices in Africa, voices in Australia, voices in Asia, voices in America, voices in Europa, voices in Africa. Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Ubuntu. I am 'cause we are.
Sing for the earth. Hope is my ally. Stand with your people. Active and alive. Start from yourself. Hope is my ally. Let's make it safe. Active and alive.
Bajan del norte con logos y promesas, llenan las aguas de mercurio y tristeza. Compran gobiernos, compran la ley, el bosque se quema y tú pensando que está ok.
The story they told us was never ours. Why poison the rivers and sell us the kiwa for profit of wreckage that we endure. Hectares in power, them are burning the land. Stop burning land, stop burning future. Stop burning land, stop burning future.
Echo says a crime and we bear witness. The planet rebels gives no forgiveness. Echo says a crime and we bear witness. The planet rebels gives no forgiveness.
Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry? Can you hear nature cry?
Lights.
For the invitations to all the other members and guests that are joining us today online to take this video now, to take this song. We also created a toolkit on how to use the song, how to engage in necessary and sometimes critical conversations about organism and climate justice, environmental concerns and climate change and climate crises. And the toolkit will be published in a couple of weeks, and you'll be able to download it from the CCIVS website under the Voices for Change project. And the song is already available on YouTube. And the invitation is to be translated, make yours. The section of rapping that is still in the middle of the action is actually the Politano is the specific dialect in the college in Italy. And the group that wrote the song took it and made it there. And that was the instruction behind it. And then just for those that don't work with it's God bless. So it's something that came out of Africa, maybe God bless Africa, Europe, Asia, the Americas. Represent all of our diverse cultures and diverse locations. And as Davina mentioned before, the lyrics of this song came out of a harvested story. And as part of a much bigger impact measurement process, which the partners were also trained in. And during the training, before we started writing the song, we had the task of going through all of these environmental / social challenges and problems that were harvested from the organization. It was difficult. The story of ski turtles from India, you hear this coming out of the lyrics of the song, and being burnt. And we found common ground in these challenges. And now we're going to hear from Francesco, who is joining us online to explain deeper this process of impact measurement that's still ongoing now that these local actions have taken place. We're seeing what changes are occurring. You know, what is the impact of this? Is it just a response, or are we impacting the world? I'm going to hand over to Francesco.
Okay, fantastic. Hello, can you hear me? I can see my friend more than I could ever ask.
Coming out from.
Okay,
coming out from there.
Okay, wonderful.
You hear me?
Yes. Fantastic. Should I share the presentation, or do you put it up? How do you?
I can share it.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. So as already showed earlier by our colleagues, my role in this project has been mostly to collect these stories and partially to analyze them. But most of the work has been done by the organizations, by the staff of the organization, and by the young people involved. Most of you might remember me from yesterday. Hopefully none of you is so drunk from yesterday's night that you don't remember me. And as the person who made you go to lunch late. So let's avoid that. I'll go through the findings that we have at the moment. We are still working on many of the stories because there is a lot of material in them, but I will share with you at least the most important findings for the moment. So we can move to the first slides. We will stay a lot on the first slide, but don't worry, then I'll go very fast. I named this presentation Concrete Changes because we have been working on the music. We will focus for the stories on the lyrics, so to say, and see how many things are actually coming out from what the people involved in your local actions tell us through the stories that were collected by all of you members. And there are two things that can be summarized in this Concrete Changes title that are recurring across the stories. One is that concrete, meaning as cement, as the urbanization of our society, as the predominance of construction over green spaces, it does change us, meaning that when we collected the stories of challenges, we see these as one of the most recurring challenges, the fact that concrete changes the way we live, and that we need to resist and react and repair these changes. At the same time, we also see from the stories that the local actions do produce concrete changes, real changes that are immediate, that can be replicated, and that therefore are worth our effort. So that's why the concrete changes. As I said, we will stay long on this first slide just to share with you how much there is in each of the single stories. So the beauty of collecting stories is that they come in different ways. Some of you directly put their input from the stories in the main song and in its variations. We know that the artists read some of the stories of challenges before creating the song itself. One of the ways that, in this case, Cantiere Giovani and Mario, specifically in Italy, share their story is also through comics. And I just isolated one drawing from this comic, which, for those of you who are less familiar with Italian, sees two people in Naples, in one of the areas of Naples, looking at all this nothing. So the one person says, "Look at all this nothing. What an oceanic feeling." And the other person says, "You are right. How many infinite possibilities." So this is, as all the things that I will share, based on a true story. This was our challenge, to have monitoring and evaluation that comes directly from the lived experiences of the people that were involved in the local actions. But the reason why I isolated this one is about first of all, it's a very beautiful way of sharing a story, comics in general. But it's also that it contains something somehow incredible, unless you do the text analysis as your job, and it's not even my job. This idea of oceanic feeling we can trace it back to a specific moment in time, December 5th, which many of you might know more as the International Volunteers Day, and you will probably continue to consider that the most important thing that happened on December 1st and December 5th. But on December 5th, 1927, Monsieur Roland, who is a literature Nobel Prize for literature from France, wrote to Sigmund Freud, using for the very first time this term of oceanic feeling. And Freud wrote an entire book called Civilization and Its Discontents, which doesn't talk about us, but might very well talk about us, because it's an entire book about this disconnection between the individual and the so-called civilization, the word that he used at the time. So it's incredible to me to see how in one single slide of a single story out of all the things that you shared, we have so much an explosion of meaning that we simply can't have when we have the pre-test, post-test statistics that I've shared, millions of them, I mean, not millions, but hundreds and hundreds of statistics with you in the last 10 years. We have worked a lot on that. We can prove mathematically, statistically, that there is a change in people, but as one of the stories from Turkey says, knowing a lot doesn't really mean understanding. So using stories gives us an explosion of meaning, and that's why we want, first of all, to put the stories online. They will be in the capsule, some of them, so that you can actually read them, because that's the best way to go. So now we can proceed very fast to see to the next slide. Thank you, Julieta. So I'll keep my promise. This is just a reminder. Many of you, as we know, were online for the trainings. That's how you manage to collect the stories. The main idea of using the most significant change technique instead of the usual interviews or instead of the usual surveys that we have used in the past was to adapt our monitoring and evaluation approach to the creative approach of the whole project. So we collected a lot of stories of challenge before the local actions and a lot of stories of change after the local actions. And we can move to see what, I mean, I already talked about why, so you can even skip this slide and go straight to the next one. I already shared why we wanted this technique. Another reason is that this technique is very participatory. So it allows all the stakeholders involved to share their point of view and their stories about what happened, not just what we think happened, but their point of view, their perspective. So what we did was relatively simple. We asked people, looking back at the last month, what they thought it was the most significant challenge that they faced. This was the first round of collecting stories. And then what was the most significant change that they saw happening because of the local actions. We can move to the summary of the challenges. Again, as I shared at the beginning, there is a few common themes. The stronger one being a disconnection between people and nature that are shared by many of the people from Turkey to Palestine to Italy to India to Ecuador. There is a lot of stories in which this disconnection is the main theme. So in the world of one of the stories, where the fields used to be, there's just a stretch of concrete. So not only nature is changing, but is disappearing. And there is a lot of stories in which it's clear that this is not just a problem for the environment, it's a problem because injustices arise much more easily when this disconnection is present. We want to focus more on the stories of change because we do see a lot of positive impact from the local actions and from the whole project in general. So while we move to the next slide, I just want to remind us, as in the word of another story, that it's never been easy. It's not the first time that we face challenges, and we have been facing them as an International Voluntary Service movement different type of challenges for many, many years. But these challenges of this connection between humans and nature are now the biggest maybe that the network is facing and contributing to in its actions at the moment. So when we look at the stories that we collected, stories of change, we can see that the small scale actions are actually working a lot. There is an amazing story collected again, in this case in Italy, about just watering the basil. You can see that the person who is a migrant, who is facing many difficulties with the so-called double jeopardy, meaning that in addition to the difficulties of being a migrant, he also has a physical disability that adds to his difficulty. But he shared in the story that when he waters the basil, he can see that the leaves move and the smell comes to nose. And then again, we are back to literature Nobel Prizes. It has this very feeling of Marcel Proust, of remembering home from Italy to Ghana, thanks to the simple act of watering the leaves. And you can see that at the end he says, I like this garden, I help with the water, don't worry for the summer. So small actions create new actions, new participation. And this is across all the projects that we have seen. All the stories tell us that every single act of care is an act against despair and it's against of repairing. So we can see the second slide about the positive story collections, which talks more about what we do together. So another common element of all these stories is the idea that connecting to each other is in itself the act of resistance that works the best. So none of these stories talk only about that local actions, that local place. All of them show the connection that the project wanted to create and that IVS in general wants to create, meaning that whether it's the solidarity among different places, networks created to educate about the climate justice and environmental challenges, but there is in each story, another story is contained and the connection with another story. So you can read them kind of one after the other and it's still the same story. And this is, the photo is from India in this case, someone that put the accent very much in the whole life on the rivers as source of relations. So these relations are appearing in form of river, in form of air pollution, in form of cooperation, in form of music, of course, all across the stories. Basically, there are 4 themes that we can summarize in the next 2 slides as the main outcomes of the cooperation and as our evidence through the stories that the project has been working, I would say, pretty well. The first theme is that of justice and interdependence. You can see 2 pictures that are part of 2 stories that you might have in the room. I mean, Adli, I saw him. I don't know if Elena is there, but you can see that what happens in this case in an e-waste landfill in Palestine, which we know.
1 second, Francesco.
Yes.
1 minute. We have a speaker situation.
Ooh.
Can you try now to speak?
Yes.
Please?
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Again?
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's perfect. So I was sharing and this is the last thing I will share for today. Perfectly on time. There's basically 4 themes of transformation that we can see across the stories that were shared. The first is the idea of justice and interdependence, meaning the way that we live the injustice in any place in the world, whether it's, in this case, the picture of the e-waste landfill in Palestine, as an injustice that we should repair altogether. So the second picture, together with the one from Palestine with the e-waste, is a manifestation in Italy for Palestine. And the way Elena put it in the story is like, what comes out very strong is we stopped because we can't continue life as usual. We needed to stop because of what is happening. And this idea that there is an interdependence, that no community should be sacrificed for the survival of another, is very present in the stories. This connection as justice. The second part is much more related to how we educate ourselves and others about the challenges of climate change. and about the challenges of climate justice. So again, these are two pictures, one from Turkey, one from Italy, where you see concrete research is done, concrete education is done, but in a network way, trying to put together everything that we know. And the stories show how it's important to learn from each other, which is what the project has been proposing a lot as well. So if we want real change in the words of an educator in Turkey, we must connect, collaborate, and share beyond borders. And that is what the project has been promoting a lot. And then last slide with the two more themes. One is, let's say, self-evident, even from the people, some of the people at least in the room, and all the people we saw in the videos, in the local actions, is that all these stories, even those told by old people or kind of old people, let's say my age, have youth as catalyst. The fact that youth is there, youth is contributing, really pushes, triggers the change, and reassures also about the sustainability of the change. But also, as a final, let's say, summary of what's in the stories, there are stories of reclaiming, repairing, and resisting. Meaning there are stories in which the challenges that were shared in the first collection of the stories are taken, and we managed to actually make those changes thanks to the networks, thanks to the involvement of the youth, and thanks to the knowledge. So thanks to these three pillars that come as the three main themes of transformation. So I took as a final quote, one from India, in which a former turtle poacher became turtle protector, and he was asked by the children, will the turtles come again? And he would point to the moonlit beach and reply, with your help, they will come. Because this connection also, which is intergenerational, is what makes all the stories very strong, because they show that it is actually happening, that we are reclaiming our environmental rights, we are repairing the damages made by the concrete, among others, and we are resisting these changes in a positive way. So that's all we can find in the stories, but the best will be to read them. So we will make sure that they are available to you, that are included in the capsule, and that you can actually dive into this explosion of meaning yourself by reading the stories that were shared. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much to Francesco. I've just been asked to let everybody know that there is a restroom or a bathroom just outside to the right. You don't have to go all the way back to the restaurant. And I'm going to pass, speaking of youth as catalysts, I'm going to pass to two members of our youth, Daniel and Delia, and they're going to share another outcome project, which is a very important document on the rights of volunteers.
Thank you so much. One, I'm Dalia, and we are going to present the new volunteer rights framework. So when we talk about volunteering, we think of connection, of resistance, of building bridges across cultures, gender, age, everything. It's bringing people together for change, for peace, for a better future. And it's a beautiful story. But of course, behind so many positive stories, there are still many barriers that block people from participating in these projects all over the world. I'm sure we are familiar of people facing racism, sexism, harassment during these projects. And people's labor, emotional or physical, that goes unrecognized. This is something that has been very thematic in a couple of days. So this framework comes from these hundreds of testimonies from volunteers and organizations who want a better future for volunteering and who say that we love this movement, but we need to be treated fairly.
So why does this matter? IVS was built on solidarity, not charity. It was and is about working with communities. There's a quote in the Volunteer Rights Framework. If you come to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you come because your liberation is bound up with mine, let's work together. And that's the spirit behind the Volunteer Rights Framework, making sure that liberation, fairness, and safety are not just ideals, embedded in our everyday practice.
So the framework defines what every IVS volunteer should come to expect. They need to be made explicit because they're not going to implement this trade project. So amongst the new framework, we suggest that volunteers learning activities should be recognized and not just treated as some nice supplements, actually recognized as being concrete efforts, because it is. That volunteers are able to move freely, safely, and equally, without being punished by visa systems and economic barriers. That participation will also be safe and inclusive, free from harassment, and with mental health and well-being supports. That the funding and organization of volunteering be colonized, not based on who has more money or who the funding organizations prefer to fund. And finally, that young people have real seats at the table to shape how the world of IVS can evolve from here on to the future. So it's a statement of values that we've already discussed a lot, and also practical tools that we can use across all of our organizations to for advocacy, funding discussions, and program design, and also to protect the well-being of our lovely volunteers.
Because we know without rights, volunteering can slip into privilege. If only certain people can afford to take part, or only certain passports are welcome, then we're not doing solidarity. We'd be repeating the same inequalities we claim to challenge. So this framework is our collective way of saying volunteering should be transformative for everyone and not extractive for any. So our call to action, if you haven't read it, please read it, but don't just read it, use it, challenge it, bring it to your members, your volunteers, your partners, your organization, and ask yourself, are we living up to these rights? So hopefully this isn't anything new to you all. It shouldn't be a new idea. This framework will hopefully keep us a common language and tools to keep doing it together. Thank you.
So I'd like to pass the floor to Cecilia Fisher, the International Music Council. She's been consulting with the ideas on our advocacy roadmap.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. I hope you're feeling well together with us. You have just heard about the 8 volunteer rights. I'm personally very happy that we found this notion of rights, because this is also why the International Music Council was involved in this project Voices for Change. As my colleague David said, we are a value-based organization. Our values are embedded in what we call the 5 music rights for every child and adult, and also for musical artists. So very happy to have been involved in the elaboration of the volunteer rights, and also been involved in how can we make these rights a reality through the policy and advocacy framework that I would like to present now. Yes, the volunteer rights are, as we heard, is about what every IVS participant deserves. The question now is, how do we turn these principles into policy? Individual organizations can't fix discriminatory visa regimes or reform EU funding. This requires coordinated advocacy, targeting the institutions that have power to change the system. Because the barriers are structural. Visas that exclude global south volunteers, funding concentrated in the north, experiential learning that is dismissed, inadequate protection for volunteers. But this moment is unprecedented because we have the window of opportunity to upscale our advocacy. The International Voluntary 2026 puts volunteering in the global spotlight. Negotiations for the next EU budget are redesigning also EU youth programs. Climate urgency demands community-led responses. So this framework is our strategic response. Can we have the first slide? As I said, the moment is now. Now, what do we demand? And we can go to the next slide. The document is pretty elaborate on this, but let me pick a few concrete key demands for policy change. From national government, we demand dedicated volunteer visas with fast track for recognized IVS organizations. We also demand fee waivers for funded programs. So if the national government or even if the EU funds a program, we demand that there be a fee waiver for participants in this funded program. We also demand monitoring and addressing discriminatory refusals. Recognition systems that are compatible with CCIVS skills. We also demand that IVS be included in climate action plans. We also believe that local governments have a role to play because they can help with co-funding, they can help with visa support letters, they can also intervene in rapid response protocols. From the European Union, and we really see European Union as both a policymaker and the funder, we believe that the current negotiations, as I said, for the next budget, that will be from 2028 to 2037, I believe. This is really the window now for policy action, advocacy action. These negotiations will happen, are happening now. They will last until 2027. So IVS organizations have already formulated some advocacy ask, I think, under the leadership of EACEA. And for example, these asks include to increase the Erasmus Plus budget by 5 times, which would allow to reach also marginalized youth, to maintain the youth chapter with 15% budget earmark, to reformulate Erasmus Plus objectives away from the employability narrative towards more active citizenship and global solidarity, and to safeguard the European Solidarity Corps as volunteering, not as an employment training. In addition, there's a proposal to create a new 4th key action budget line that would be exclusively be for so-called third countries. Third countries is a very bad notion in the EU system. Actually, it defines countries that are not part of the program that is being funded. So a program is funded by program countries, so the countries pay a contribution so that the program can be implemented, and all the countries that have not contributed to this program are called third countries. Sorry, that's really new jargon. And also we demand a guarantee access for grassroots organizations, because we see that large operators capture almost all of the funding, and that's actually something that we also see in the culture field. Now, from other funders such as foundations and bilateral funders, we demand that they decolonize their mechanisms by transfer decision-making power, and that they invest in community-led climate justice action. From UNESCO, we would like to see a work on recognition guidelines, which would also involve a strong intersectoral collaboration Because we know that UNESCO has a very big issue working in silos. So we really need here that different units, different departments work together on this issue. And universities, this is also about recognition. So here we would like to make sure, we need to make sure that credits are not mandatory, but still remain an option. The framework formulates each demand specifically measurable and time bound. We can go to the last slide, which is about the actual roadmap. How do we get there? And we suggest 3 phases. This framework is today presented here in Pretoria at the symposium that will be discussed this afternoon by CCIVS members to review and to refine it. And then actually it could be launched, the volunteer rights as such could be launched on the occasion of on 5th of December. And we also suggest that we secure commitments at the Empower EU Summit that happens in June 2026. The target is that we obtain government endorsements for the volunteer rights, and also the work started, then the work will have started on the UNESCO resolution. The second phase, again, is about EU budget negotiations that last until 2028. Here, we suggest that we meet with stakeholders from the EU on a regular basis. We also aim for national recognition in 10 countries. And in the phase 3, which we call accountability, we track, we report, we name failures publicly, and we celebrate wins. The final target by 2030, again, it's a proposal, would be that visa barriers cut by 50%, that funding flows more equitably, and that volunteers working across the board are being protected. This framework establishes what institutions must do, when they must do it, and how we hold them accountable. The rights are clear, the path is mapped. The moment is now, as I said, and I look very much forward to discussing this framework with CCIVS and others in this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Very important work and introduction. We're going to start now for a 30-minute coffee break. Please come back after the break. We've got 4 super interesting panelists with us, and here to discuss and to share their inputs so that we can assess our decolonial approach and methodology within CCIVS. And I encourage everyone to bring notebooks to really listen to what the speakers are sharing about, because after lunch, we will get into small working groups to include the input and the information that we receive into our strategic plan and our plan of action that we'll be working on this afternoon. Yeah, just please return on time for panel discussion, and we're looking forward to seeing you
in the Change project. We apply decolonial methodologies to environmental and social justice in the International Voluntary Service. We use music and song, but from your perspective, what does the decolonial practice actually require? Not as a rhetoric, but as a concrete change in how power, resources, and decision-making are structured.
Thank you for that, and thank you for this opportunity to engage. So as most of you should know, the colonial experience ended the sort of formality of colonialism, but it didn't end coloniality. And in the kind of critical thinking around the colonial, the decolonial, there's a recognition that Some use this term, the matrix of power has continued after the colonial moment. It expresses itself in economic relations, in political relations, its social, cultural, and knowledge-based relations. If you look around at the African context, you would basically keep in view a historical sequence: colonialism, neo-colonialism, US-led globalization, and now the second coming of fascism. In this context, Africa is still a thing. It is still an object to be exploited. Africa is now experiencing what has been called a scramble, largely for minerals, for the green transition in Europe. It's been experiencing a scramble for its fossil fuels. It's been experiencing a scramble for the digital AI shift that's happening, but it's also experiencing a scramble around militarization that's taking place in the West right now, part of the second coming of fascism. So in other words, we have been a defeated continent for the greater part of the 20th century, despite the formal independence and so on. In the context in which the world is entering a huge crisis, what I would call the fourth crisis of capitalism. It's a crisis that threatens everything, as you know. If you're talking about climate, we'll talk more about it. So in this context, to meet this crisis, and to meet the kind of power dynamics that are acting on us, those that have power over us, we really have to think deeply and hard about what is the political today. What is the decolonial conception of political? It cannot be just crowd politics. It cannot just be lobbying. Okay, we cannot work with the civilities of Western politics anymore. We've got to have a politics that truly brings back our own power. We are the agents of change. This is very, very important. It's got to bring back our conception, our pre-colonial conception of self. It's got to bring back our archives of knowledge. This is absolutely crucial if we're going to meet this crisis head on. And that does mean, again, that we need to frame politics as transformative politics, where our communities, our villages, our towns and cities can own the problems and the solutions. It cannot be power structures. It cannot be political parties. It cannot be elites. I can get into the concreteness of this, but I think as we talk more about climate justice, I'll give you some insights into what we're doing. I don't want to hold the time. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And I think it's important that we remember that African context is also happening in Latin America and many other foreign countries as well, because that can relate very much to the story of the Palestinians and the raising around from all around the global south. So I'd like to ask one more question to you, and then I'm going to pass the mic around. So, within the theme of decolonial practice in reality, in your work with climate justice and advocacy and activism, have you seen the decolonial approaches shift power between North and South? Or is the concept being co-opted into symbolizations?
So this is a great question, and I would argue climate justice is a decolonial politics. There's four aspects to climate justice. There's the ethical aspect of climate justice that recognizes that the global south will be responsible for this problem, and they are over climate gain. There's also a recognition that the global south is carrying the burden of loss, damage, and costs that go with that. There's also another ethical aspect to this, which is about earth justice, which I think resonates with the song we put out around echoes of nature and so on. That is a crucial aspect of climate justice, and it's been argued inside the multilateral process. Whether it's young people like yourselves, President Turnbull, iconic name around this, but more than them, many young people from across the world have made these arguments. They've also amplified the urgencies of climate science. But sadly, over the past few decades, that hasn't shifted that. We haven't got that political tipping point and breakthrough. The other aspect of climate justice is critique. It's critique of fossil capitalism, The use of oil, coal, and gas for 150 years, and the continuation of that, which is taking us further into this crisis. But there's also a public crisis critique, which is much broader than just fossil capital. It's recognizing that our globalized food systems are making our societies high risk and vulnerable. Biodiversity loss is a big crisis that we are all facing, etc. This critique has been made on the streets, in our countries, outside crop processes, etc. But again, has not shifted to that. But there's two other aspects to climate justice politics. And third is climate justice as a political project. This is very, very important. It means the ambition of climate justice is to change everything if we are going to survive. And now in South Africa, we developed the world's first climate justice charter, bottom-up drought, which we took to our parliament. And this climate justice charter is a truly vision for where we want our country to go. Confront the legacies of apartheid, confront the current poly crisis, but let's secure a livable, just, and democratic future. Central to that charter is the call to place our country on a climate emergency footing now. And the big concept we are using is the idea of a climate emergency social contract. So we can rally society and we can move forward. The fourth aspect of climate justice is building a movement. This is very, very important. Aggregating our solidarities, positive solidarities for the kind of world we want, our negative solidarities, what we against. But building a movement that's very different, again, from lobbying, very different from a movement that's just going to gather crowds like Gen Z politics right now, which can obtain their victory. We need a movement that can start from below, getting our communities, villages, towns, and cities to own the problems and the solutions. And we can do this by building food sovereignty pathways. We can do this with biodiversity registers, so communities can maintain and preserve their ecosystems. We can do this with eco-mobility, pedestrianization, bicycles, and so on and so on. But I'm just giving you a glimpse of where this politics can go. And that is the decisive politics. I hate to use this phrase, but don't look up to power structures. Look to yourself. This is very, very important right now. We are at a turning point in climate politics. The 1.5 degrees Celsius overshoot is here. The multilateral process has failed. The UN gap report is talking about 2.8 overshoot by the late 2030s. This is a catastrophe. This means the climate emergency has to be mainstream now.
Thank you, Vishwas. And I think many of us don't think about working on political, or we see them as so in a deep conversation we have our unrecognized impact. That this is the work we're already doing, and you have on the ground, your messages, and then on ears that are welcome to hear again. Thank you. So I'd like to pass to you, after listening to Professor Sango, and thinking about International Voluntary Service's own projects, on projects, and voluntary exchanges. Where do you see the colonial practice happening? And is how CCIVS runs working, and where are they at? Thanks so much. Without having claiming to have a full answer to your question, I think we need to recognize that CCIVS is one of the few organizations, is particularly the only organization, I think, in the volunteering spectrum that has tackled the issue of decolonialism seriously. We've invested more than 2 years in actually working through the practice, making it not only statements of intent, but making it intensely practical into its policy papers, etc. And I think in the process, you have confronted directly the power and the power structures and the inadequate and inequitable resourcing issues that are prevalent in international voluntary service. And you've also extended that to challenge coloniality within European organizations and institutions. And in the EU itself, not only in its dealings with the global south, but also within its own region. And I saw this very clearly in your document, your policy brief on decolonizing the funding mechanisms of European Union youth programs, which challenges, and I quote, the neo-colonial and exclusionary practices that persist in the EU funding structures and to promote norms based on dialogue and negotiation, recognizing and valuing cultures which are needing to go beyond Eurocentric thinking and modes of operation. It's easy to say that, but you've actualized it in your documentation. And I think what we heard today, both in terms of the Voices of Change program and Sylvia's presentation on your advocacy framework, you are very directly taking that approach into those power structures, very deliberately and very strategically. And I think just then to comment that I think it's significant that the CCIVS policy papers place local and community-centered entities in the global south, such as community-based partnerships, global decision-making structures. You place these at the heart of the programs, and whether they are volunteer exchange or whether they are advocacy activities. And that is expression to your values of collaborative learning by doing, equity, diversity, transparency, solidarity, reciprocity, commitment, and respect for the planet and all we live in it. And I was fascinated by Francesco's presentation about stories and how those themes have come out and what they speak. And I was blown away, quite frankly, because we're so used to in the NNE environment, you know, using the same old methodologies. And I think you've really broken it down. And I think there's an absolute wealth of material which could be used exactly as Fish is saying, in mobilizing a bottom-up grassroots-based groundswell of resistance. And there was that lovely comment that came in towards the end of Francesco's presentation, reclaiming, repairing, and resisting. I think those words sum up a lot of what you were just saying, Vish. Thanks.
Thank you. So I'd like to ask Marty and after Sylvia the same question. We looked at where we're doing well, but where do you think, what are the barriers, or more significant barriers, that are preventing international voluntary service organizations from genuinely decentralizing and decentering northern expertise and power? Is this something individual organizations can overcome, or does it require a more systemic organizational approach?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for this topic. I think these are critical questions that we need to be reflecting on. I think in this space and many others that I've been working on in the last couple of years. Let me begin with somewhat of India problems, which is have some problems with the framework of the question, which has to do with the assumption that power and expertise are only concentrated in the north. I think the failure to organize different forms of power and probably different types of expertise are essential. That being said, I think we also need to recognize that, yes, I do probably the reading of power and sourcing and put and put where the resources are or concentrating, not because they belong there, they should say, or continent is spectrum for oil exploitation. The exploitation goes like You go to London, all the diamond cutting companies there are there. And we don't mind any diamonds in diamond making. It's the resources from all parts of the world that are going. And therefore, when resources are concentrated in those parts of the world, you find that the age chain or how funding model structures are inherently in favor of organizations in that part of the world by default. And organizations in our part of the world are required if they have to get grants from the age chain to either collaborate or work with other groups for being able to access those. So I think that's one of the critical lines. So much so that even when other organizations also do get different resources that they want to work directly, they are also told, no, what is the end imperative for where they're making the money? So I think all those are critical barriers to a truly colonial perspective. And out of that, you also find that the global global system has been structured in hierarchies. Again, on matters knowledge, matters resources, so much so that certain elements are valued more than others, irrespective of the fact that I think knowledge and power are dispersed throughout and they become different forms. And out of that, these novel organizations will get quite a lot. Studies show that an estimate of about only 10% makes it this aid of grants, even against who are some of the communities in the organizations. 10%, and that's very generous. Other studies have shown as little as even 2%. Yet, that money is even in the level of quote unquote doing justice or delivering development in these poor communities. So I think that's something that we need to confront, and it's a major challenge in terms of the strategy. But also, I think, given that this system benefits some more than others, there's always resistance to changes to just work. And so change is not easy. Those that are putting their legs and hands out end up being on the topic of same people that are funding them, same people that are benefiting out of this. I think lastly, the other major barrier I mean is this is squaring on actors and global stuff. I don't think our governments, but also to some extent capital and other actors, seriously take the type of things that we do the seriousness it deserves, and therefore invest. Because as the saying goes, if you have in somebody else's pockets, what people are following the general people. And therefore, unless we learn to put our hands in our own pockets, this would be something that we like to do. That is not to discount the fact that skilled editors there, they don't have those right resources, but at least there needs to be positive development towards this particular finding these particular issues. So how do we overcome this? I think definitely reforming the funding process for the HM which is not, it's easier said than done, but I think organizations like this, like the advocacy that she was talking about, and the other ways through which to ensure it's the movement that Mish is talking about, where we build the groundswell of pushing local partners of the world, but also our own governments so that we start valuing all our contributions. But I think from perhaps a more intellectual side of things is also to embrace the value of ability in knowledge, which is and capacity, which I think is located or multiple located in all the geographies. So much so that forums like this, when we come here, we're coming to learn from each other and not one downloading this type of knowledge to others. And in a way that calls for about stakeholder on both sides. Institutional or organizational type of engagements, which is genuine, which the genuine desire to learn from one another. I think I've been that.
Thank you very much. I feel very humbled to be part of this roundtable discussion. And I really speak from my perspective, having worked for a long time for an international organization facing also similar issues, and also having worked with CCIVS for the past year on these issues. So regarding your question, and I will echo a lot of what you have said, Professor. There is not a single obstacle to this. I think it's what I would call a system of self-reinforcing factors. The system where funding structures, institutional legitimacy, colonial knowledge hierarchy play together and mutually reinforce what I would call a northern dominance. And individual organizations' efforts are essential, but they are insufficient. What is needed to be a coordinated collective effort and systemic transformation, because the barriers are systemic. So transformation needs to be systemic too. And I would just like to pick one of these factors that I have mentioned about legitimacy, and it has been mentioned also by the colleagues on the panel. It's the pattern that we see is that northern organizations are positioned as guarantors of quality, which also means that donors trust northern NGOs to manage southern partners. Again, it's not only it's in every field. I can assure you that we have exactly the same issues in the culture field. So also when it comes to recognition, a lot of southern partners that seek recognition need to actually go to northern partners to have their recognition processes certified. So the trap is that really southern organizations really must partner with northern ones to access legitimacy. This is what we see. This is what needs a systemic approach and change. And I believe, again, individual institutions can only so much. Of course, as an individual organization, you can refuse the colonial funding pattern. You can refuse certain things, you can make statements, but it won't change. So therefore, I believe that an organization such as CCIVS is uniquely positioned to be part of the change, to cause the change, initiate the change. There are several. Also, I spoke about moments, windows of opportunities for such advocacy work, which very clearly is next year's 2026, the International Voluntary Year. So it really puts volunteering in the spotlight of the global conversation, and that's a moment where we should address these issues. And also CCIVS is similarly positioned to also hold our systems or hold institutions accountable for what they do as an international organization. Thank you so much for this very valuable input. I'd love us to talk a little bit now about how we move from grassroots action to policy change. My first question I'm going to address you. I'm wondering if so we often see that there's a gap between what grassroots movements want to say and what policymakers are willing to hear. And how do volunteer advocates navigate this without diluting our message or losing the impact of our message or our political edge? So how do we translate our message so they can hear us without diluting our message?
Well, this is a difficult question, and I had to do a bit of consultation to get my head around it. But I think the first point is that there are various reasons why grassroots movements and their lived experience do not get the attention of policymakers. For example, and this is, I'm sure given common knowledge for you, different political interests, distorted messaging, and maybe different levels of expertise within those movements and among the volunteers themselves. So the result is that what is a priority at grassroots level is often, it just fails to become a priority or a point of attention for decision-making groups. And just picking up on what Vish was saying about politics, we have to see politics as much more than the government or the state. We have to see it as a way of living in the world, and that it is about owning decisions and participation in decision making at all levels. And so everything that CCIVS does is intensely political. So coming back to the volunteers then, how do we bridge the gap, as you said? The volunteers are critical in respect of communicating the realities of what's happening on the world, whether it be environmental issues or food insecurity, or whatever it is in this country, gender-based violence, and many other situations. Communicating those realities of the grassroots experience and their movements to policymakers, but for them to have that opportunity, they need a chance to participate. Not only that, they need to be empowered or given a chance to develop their capacity to share their views and make their voices heard, to learn how to argue, to learn that when we're confronting, as Sylvia so clearly pointed out, structures that are intensely resistant to change because of their own vested interests. How do I actually structure my position in terms that it reaches the ear of those in power, and that they will actually hear it in terms of their own interests? But then, in particular, who will help volunteers do that? It is, in fact, the organizations, the volunteer involved in organizations, who need to be accountable for the extent to which their volunteers and their participants have been supported to develop these skills and collect the evidence on the ground. I know from conversations I've had with relatives in the past about the Zimbabwe experience, how very often then people in government will say, oh, well, your study is not legitimate because it wasn't done by an NGO. So partnering with the right people, again, it's the business of the organization, volunteer involvement organization, getting in touch with partners who can add to the credibility of those submissions, if not demands. And there's just too much, how can I put it? I think people in government tend to recognize with NGOs that are established and very often foreign funded, as being legitimate and credible, rather than the voices of the community-based organizations and the volunteer segment. So if the onus lies with the organizations, and they need to enable their volunteers to get involved in advocacy, community development, and the decision-making progress. I hope that helps.
Thank you. What I'm hearing there very much is, again, this barrier of we need to legitimize the music, but it's not leveraging the power that does exist within the ideas. So using power in the right way, power wins rather than just symbolically stand for as global organizations to legitimize, but really use this position that we have, the strength that we have, it's existing body to bring the voice forward. And it's our role as member organizations and volunteers to translate that first locally and then into the more centrals. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to ask you a question again in time for business backup. The Voices of the Change project, we harvested stories about volunteers and community-based social and environmental issues, actions, work camps, and changes and challenges that our members are facing in different places around the world. In your experience, what actually transforms grassroots volunteer-led action into policy change? What are the conditions that need to be present?
That's a very difficult question because we are in this great crisis that I've marched about for. So some of the key actors that consider themselves the makers of policy are in trouble. So if you look at states, / governments, if you like, many of them don't look at the world through the lens of crisis. They don't look at the world through the lens of complexity. They don't actually increasingly look at the world through democratic eyes. States have become market actors. They have been imbued over the past 4 decades with the market rationality. Everything is about risk to capital and business, not risk to society. So you have states that are increasingly being remade to be anti-democratic. Actually, there is performance around elections and so on, but after you vote, the policies that they implement are what businesses want, etc. You look at political parties. Political parties are meant to aggregate representative interests, translate that into policy, etc. They are in trouble. Many of them do not have vision. They don't think systemically to go to the root causes of the crisis we are living right now. They are very transactional. And some of them can go to very extreme populist directions, and hence offer no substance. Okay. So you have a very serious challenge around these kinds of institutions. So for me, I'm going to leave you with one idea that I'm in an activist group right now. I've been there for the past few days, and I was going back to it. I'm activists from different parts of the country. And the concept we are working with is the concept of democratic systemic reforms. This concept of democratic systemic reforms comes organically from us knocking on the door of our parliament to get our charter adopted, which section 234 provides for charters to be adopted in South Africa. They ignore us. We're now translating the 14 alternatives in that charter into democratic systemic reforms. Democratic in the sense that, again, we are owning the problems and solutions of this crisis, but democratic also in the sense that the knowledge we need to navigate this crisis, the ingenuity rate, has got to do with many, many people figuring out this problem. Bureaucracy cannot figure out the catastrophes that are coming, I assure you. Okay. So we've got activists in rural villages. There's one of them called Masinto Gumeli. She sat with elders, and they told her in the midst of the drought, clean the streams, form little channels so water can be stored in ponds. Today, her village has water. That's the ingenuity rate of knowledge at work. It's not sitting in a technocratic bureaucracy. Out there somewhere in this country, there's a woman in a rural village that through generational knowledge has cultivated a very drought-resistant millet. It's out there. Okay. That's the ingenuity rate of democratic systemic reforms.
Systemic because we're going to the root causes. We are running out of time. The political parties want the path of least resistance. The state the same, they want to cut the ribbon, they want to have performance. We need to go to the heart of the crops, okay? So we're talking about phase out of fossil fuels, how we do that. How do we transition our food systems to be a strategic sector, food sovereign, etc.? How do we democratize water commonly so communities can control water? Water and food is going to break everything. And it's reform because if we march through society, we do the hard work, we win over society to these perspectives, these ideas, they are already implemented, then of course we will democratize the state. We will ensure that these reforms translate into institutional change, into regulation, into a reorientation of resources. So again, you're not ignoring the state, but you're coming at the state with massive power from below. I want to leave you with that. I hope it helps.
It's a people's movement. It's a volunteers movement. It's coming from willingness, volunteerism, and we don't need someone to tell us what to do from far away. Thank you. So, Professor Martin, I'd love to ask you, when we speak about the most significant change, or we've been using this term with such as beautiful presentation and powerful stories telling. When we talk about scaling grassroots action, this is the challenge. What if scaling requires compromise of colonial principles to put institutional language? The same question being asked again. What's your advice to organizations who are facing that? Some of our members are afraid to speak out or afraid to take certain positions, because of the risk that is great. So it's, yeah, my question to you is how do we scale when we face those challenges?
Again, a very difficult question for someone who's facing two spaces. I'm not a developer, so I can't have hands. But at the same time, the little that I don't, I'll speak to that. I think the challenges of scale, and especially in a very colonial context that they talk about, require strategy. They require the building coalitions of the willing, but it's also knowing exactly who to reach out so that for again policy influencing practices and things like that. And I'll give examples. In certain countries, not that many, there have been organizations, volunteer organizations across the African continent who, for instance, have done what we may think is or what I can take to be important work in collaborating within the sector, but also reaching out to government agencies in establishing volunteer policies, establishing talking about volunteer rights or volunteer program. So collaboration is there. I think it's really important. But in doing so, they need to be guided by principles of centering local needs. And I'm saying this because you'll find, again, quite a lot of experience that even organizations that say investing, for instance, let's say corporate volunteering, this country or elsewhere, they will implement what they think communities need or things that will produce the corporate interest, as opposed to what communities need. Or involving these local grassroots agencies in defining this is what we need, and therefore, if you come into us and want to put up work with us to help us go from point A to B, this is what our priorities are. I'll cite a study by one of my PhD students who gave them in Northwest Province in the Platinum Belt. I'm not there with companies or whatever, but we find that companies will come in, they'll say we've invested X amount of money, community development, including through volunteering and things like that. But you find that the real good communities are never, or community groups are never involved in privatization. So I think prioritizing local community means, or what is impacting community services, is critical. There's usually the arrogance of those that are additional and other forms of power to think that we know what is good for poor people. Therefore, what we give you is the medicine for your problem, your heroes, so to speak. So I think we need to do away with that. That also means that as we work, we need to ensure that our approaches are empowering multiple actors so that we can see what we're doing. If we don't do that, the type of local conflicts that are very widespread, especially in the resource extractive parts of our continent, will continue forever. In many cases, without benefiting anyone in the process. But I think it's also around ensuring transparency in the way we make decisions, the way we are prioritizing what we want. And fundamentally, we need to be wary of buzzwords. Some years ago, during COVID, I interviewed a friend of mine, his name is Henry. One of the things that he talked about was how we deal with the problems of getting resources to people or to the customers. Because based on the studies that I earlier cited, we find very disrespectful organizations, the sound of grassroots organizations. Part of that is when we continue calling for let's decolonize resources, let's get resources, then almost every single big northern NGO has now isolated their name or something other that Oxfam South Africa, something this and this. And essentially, everything this is still handled in a new code. Okay? What every new code does is it still maintains all the privileges and powers and the knowledge and everything else that comes from the south. And now starts competing not just for northern resources, but also those at the local level. So continue to further disadvantage. We need to do away with it so that any scalable interventions by grassroots can be experimented, can be implemented. We also need to be able, be willing to test what are those particular risks. So we need to have a greater risk appetite in interventions and in experiments that can be able to help us do better. That may entail diversity in terms of where we're getting resources from. It may entail, because the problem with getting one donor person or one source of funding is when things happen the way they did at the beginning of the year, North America, then everyone gets on that. Take students to a study tour. One of the places I took them this year was in Alex. In a model where I teach on governance and SDGs. This particular organization was able to make a USA. They had over 60, they had around 67 workers. I only met 5. So that tells you that if we had diversified, chances are as much of maybe some projects were affected. And with 5, we can't do it. So I think thinking creatively, diversifying sources and things like that will help us be able to do this thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, many good points. I'm listening to what you discussed with the members maybe too. Celia, I'd like to ask you from your experience as Secretary General of the International Youth Council, how does music link to advocating for policy change?
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing me to my comfort zone. At the International Music Council, we have a very holistic view on what music is or what it does. First of all, we do recognize the intrinsic value of music. When we listen to music, when we listen to music, that it enriches who we are, what we do. But in addition, we also recognize the economic value of music, music being involved in products, international exchange, etc. But we also, and this is important for our conversation, we also recognize the value of music or the role of music for social change. We value the role of music for bringing people together, for being a powerful voice. We all remember any protest movement in the world had its own songs. And I think all of us remember at least one. And our keynote speaker also mentioned the power of music. We heard about the local actions. We had song for the Voices for Change project. So music is an important medium to convey messages. And when it comes to music and advocacy or advocacy in the music field, for example, I mentioned our 5 music rights, which are also the result of listening to needs of grassroots organizations and then bringing it together into a very compact statement of rights for everyone. But in order to bring our message out about these rights, as an organization, we also recognize our own limits. So we have music rights champions, which are not members of our organizations, but which are individuals that have taken on to be the public voice for our rights. So we have the founder and director of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music, which had to relocate to Portugal after the Taliban came back. We have an activist from Egypt who had to relocate to Northern Europe because he was tortured in prison. We have a survivor of the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia who came back to Cambodia after his exile in the US to build up again the music ecosystem in Cambodia, and who brought back the old masters so that the young people can learn again from the old masters about the music there. So these champions are very important to us. We have a very young Chinese prodigy accordionist who really took on to promote the 5 music rights and promote access for everyone to music education, especially. So yes, these are our public voices. And I would like to take another example from the music field. There's an organization, international organization that brings together all the artists, rights societies. It's called SAVWA. SAVWA has an administrative board as any other organization, but they also have the presidency that is composed by personalities that represent the voice, the creators' voices from all over the world. And right now, for example, their president is Björn Ulvaeus, who is one of the 2 male members of the Swedish pop group ABBA. And of course, this is somehow an opportunistic approach, but we know that we have experienced that policymakers tend to listen more to a well-known musician who explains how certain policies actually prevent him from exercising his rights, having his rights respected. Then others go in there and say the same thing. So sometimes it is about the messenger and not the message. We have, it's really, I know it's an opportunistic approach, but we know it helps. And by the way, I spoke about the president, but the vice president of CCIVS is Yvonne Chaka Chaka. So very well known here in South Africa. So here you go, for having a public voice to convey your message. Yeah, I think I will just start. Thank you.
And I think that's really interesting how sometimes it's the message, but actually many times it's the messenger. And it made me think now of the video and all the different voices in the video. It's exactly what we were trying to bring forth through the song and the video and get those voices out there. We're even programming. Just putting in words for all. Awesome. So we have, the next theme I'd like to look at is how do we navigate international frameworks? And just I'd like to ask you, you've been working on translating grassroots action into policy papers such as the Climate Justice Charter, and these, with these three regional systems we're within, the EU and the AU and the UN, they don't always align. So when advocating across all three of these regional organizations, which priorities should take precedence? Or how can we navigate this challenging situation?
So when Antonio Guterres, a few days before the Berlin summit, announced that 1.5 degrees Celsius was lost in the UN multilateral process, that was an admission of serious and profound failure of the multilateral system. We are dealing with the most dangerous existential risk of a challenge for human and more than human life. And for over 30 years, the UN multilateral process has failed to foreground systemic solutions. Phase out fossil fuels was not there in the early 1990s. It only creeps in the Gleneagles summits in Scotland. So, this is like almost 3 decades later. And even now, those issues are not being amplified. But Antonio Guterres should have gone further. Antonio Guterres should have said to the world, we are now at a moment where we've got to treat the climate challenge as a genuine, serious planetary emergency, like COVID-19. That's where Antonio Guterres should have gone. I would have expected, to be honest with you, I didn't expect 1.5 degrees Celsius overshoot in my life. I've been a climate activist for over 20 years. I teach a course called Crisis of Civilization at my university. So now it's coming. And the magnitude of change that's coming is like category 5 cyclones hitting this country. We've never had cyclones, but the signals are already there, the signs. We are looking at mega droughts coming with 1.5, meaning more than 10, 20 years of droughts. We are looking at deadly humid heat killing off populations, particularly in cities, which are heat engines. And so we have flooding on a scale that, again, what we've had so far will pale. So the point I'm making is that the European Union, for instance, should have also made this argument that we are in a planetary climate emergency, and they have not to now. Okay. The African Union should have been making this argument as well. We are in a planetary climate emergency. Okay. I hate to say this, but if they keep us on this trajectory and we hit 2.8 as the emission gap report suggests, okay, our societies are all in trouble. Okay. Already the UN has told us over 200 million people have been displaced over the past 10 years. Those reports say. Okay. This problem is going to accelerate. In Africa, we're expecting at least 200 million people
within the next 5 to 10 years to be displaced by climate shocks. These are going to be stateless, okay? So the nation state as the container, the box to manage citizens' territory is going to be upended, ladies and gentlemen. The political geography of the world is going to be remade, it's already been remade, okay? So when you're asking me this question about the institutions, these institutions have failed us. Okay, it comes back to the point that I've been arguing consistently in all my responses. We have to aggregate our power. We have to build some solidarities. We have to ground it in ethics of care. We've got to build our own movements now that can navigate this, that can take us to a place where we can limit harm at least. Harm is locked in. Destruction is locked in. But this is the imperative of our time.
It really is for other planets and if we even want to drink to eat. There's no policy to cover now. Yes. And I'd like to ask, with the engagement already with these institutions and what they're trying to do on behalf of the members and the voice. The frameworks on climate justice and inclusion that there was already taken forward. How can we, as an organization of movements, distinguish between genuine policy opportunity, where we're actually going to make a difference, make a change, and our voices will be heard, as opposed to these performative commitments where we're just being told yes, and maybe bumping at the wrong door. I don't know what to say, but how can we? How do we know where it's worth our while as an organization to bring the voice forward? I don't know, how possibly a difficult question to answer.
Thank you, Kate. It's a difficult question to answer, especially after we have heard that institutions have failed us, and are failing us, continue to fail us. And of course, when we speak about competent commitment, a very provocative statement would be on the SDGs, the competent commitment. How serious are we? How serious are our states about these? Speaking of the SDGs, again, I may take us back for a second to the culture field. There's no SDG related to culture, and we argue we is not INC, but the culture field, the strategic alliance among many cultural organizations. We argue that the failure of SDGs is actually due to the fact that culture has not been taken into consideration. But this was just a digression from our conversation. Yes, it is very difficult to distinguish between what we would call performative commitment and genuine policy opportunity. For example, when we look at who's in control of resources, of decisions, a performative commitment would be, for example, when you talk about youth consultations. Young people are being consulted, but they are not part of the decision making. They are merely consulted. Climate funds require northern intermediaries to reach southern communities. That is important. Participation without power is the performative commitment. So, if we want to look for genuine opportunities, let's look for decision-making authority being transferred to the affected community. Again, the community-led development. Or what we have called for in our volunteer rights and our advocacy paper, that funding is being given directly to global south organizations without any gatekeeping from the north. That would be a genuine policy. And also giving veto power to communities over projects on their land. This is really power. This is genuine policy opportunity. So there are lots of these examples that I could share, but it is not easy to distinguish. And we have to be very, very attentive and sometimes also not easy to be alone in this, and that's why collaboration, I think many of us have mentioned this, collaboration in this is so important. We live it every day. Be together gives us more resilience. So that's what I wanted to share on this topic. It's not easy, really not. Thank you.
So, because of the time constraint, I'm going to move to another theme. And we want to look at this discussion now. It's the CCIVS, and we're working on a strategic plan and strategic choices. And so, love to hear from you. The Voice of the Change project has revealed our shared ecological challenges. I would say it's reinforced our understanding of these things. And what are common issues around decolonial practice and advocacy needs of the areas and our partner organization, the members and volunteers. These include recognition, decolonized funding systems, and visa accessibility, and various others. But do you have any suggestions, and what are they for CCIVS to prioritize for our next 26 to 2030 strategic plan going forward? Advice.
Thanks, Kate. This is a good question, and it does relate to the point that we've just been discussing about how do we deal with these failed multilateral institutions. Unfortunately, they are not going to relinquish power very easily. And so I think one's got to work on a number of fronts at the same time. Firstly, I think I've already said that in my view, CCIVS occupies a unique position in the international volunteering field. Your value base and how you work really puts you, distinguish you within that field. I think one of the things that's got to happen, and building on what Commissioner was saying earlier, if groundswell and movements are the way to go, I think CCIVS should be taking a leadership role in this field. And the question is, what will it take to do that? And obviously, scarcity of resources is a critical issue. But thinking about the issue we've just been talking about, the relationships with the EU, the UN, and the AU, it seems to me it's not an either or. I think it's got to be both and. And I think some of the work that you're doing right now, your planned work on working with the Zimbabwean University on the CCIVS skills project, is really critical. It relates to one of your advocacy goals, well, at least one of your advocacy goals. It creates the possibility for evidence based, it's partnership based. And the question in my mind was, when talking to the AU, might this be something that they would like to replicate in other African countries with their volunteering project, but on the basis that it should be from the ground up, not imposed. The AU's volunteering work is very strange to me. I don't quite understand it. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion is what I think is I feel it's a gap, but I could be wrong. I think in devising creative approaches to your advocacy, there is, in my mind, but I think it might be closing it to some extent with the Voices for Change project. And that is the gap in showing how decolonized international volunteer exchange happens in practice. And to me, in other words, I think there's a need to build an evidence base that underpins the work of CCIVS lobbying and advocacy, and in order to ground your leadership role in the field, give it legitimacy, and so on. You may not be able to do this by yourself, and you may well have to diversify and strengthen your partnerships, firstly in the ideas field, but also working as you're starting to do universities and partners in other parts of the world. It's that thing about, well, whose opinion counts, okay? And but that in itself, when we say develop an evidence base of how this practice actually works, the question is through whose lens will this evidence be built? And much of the CCIVS's research to date, which has been quite extensive, focuses on the international volunteers themselves. What seems to be missing to me, and I could be wrong, but I think we need much more evidence from the communities themselves with whom you are working. Because while your thinking is community-centered, what I see in your documentation, there's a lacuna, there's a gap in that respect. So, I mean, I do think that the impact measurement training that was done in May and what's coming out of the stories holds great promise, but I think you're also going to have to be more deliberate about that. And again, choosing your partners carefully is important. And then just on that, I think going back to Celia's earlier point about the moment, this moment of IYB 26, I think that the call to action that was drafted with CCIV's participation, Forum, EACEA, what are they?
ICY.
Yes. They cite 3 areas of priority action in relation to volunteering, the call, the draft that I've seen. Recognition, support, and safeguarding. Now, your volunteer rights framework speaks to all 3 issues, and the CIVS Skills Project speaks directly to recognition. So what I wanted to suggest is that you consider firstly documenting your efforts to steer both of those projects to fruition. And Francesca outlined some of that earlier today. So the process by which you get there, and that also speaks to the potential for scaling, because unless you know how you got there, it's difficult for others to build on those examples. And then secondly, and this is absolutely critical, that you plan how to communicate those outcomes strategically to partners, whether they be those failed multi-sectoral, multilateral institutions or other partners, the broader IVS community, as well as national and regional stakeholders in the IVS landscape. Not only in Europe and Africa, but extended, as you've said in the song, to Asia and Latin America as well. And I think that will help to build the profile of CCIVS beyond its European base, and possibly unlock new resources and partnerships going forward. It's a big ask. It requires all the work you've already put into your advocacy strategy. You will have to do similar work for this is what I'm suggesting. But I think you have the will and the experience and the knowledge to do it. I don't know if you have the resources, but I think with partners you can probably get there. Let's see.
Thank you very much for that input. And I know we're taking notes and we're going to deep dive into working with after this. Because of the time constraint, I'm going to jump forward to my final question, which I'd love to ask all of you. And we might not all have a chance to answer, but Professor Murphy, I'll let you answer it first, and it's regarding our political positioning. So environmental and social justice advocacy demands political positioning. And do you think CCIVS could take a clear stand on climate justice and migration and inequality? Or should we as an organization maintain distance from political advocacy? What would you say are some of the risks either way?
I think you are the problem. The question whether we need to take or CCIVS needs to take up clear stance. My simple answer is yes. And it is yes because we have to name what the problem is. We have to offer solutions of what we think are solutions to all the public crisis that we're talking about. Because in the absence of that, then we'll be extremely confident. And I know these are like us group, perhaps with various political positions as part of the membership. But nonetheless, if you need to build the critical mass that we're talking about to address the climate crisis, if you need to speak to the evils of the hyper-militarization that is bombing certain parts of, I mean, some people in the world out of existence. I think silence is complicity. So, in my view, we need to be very intentional and say, this is the problem, this is what the solution is to me. But there will be details. Some of us are marked in red alerts, in travels and things like that. These are things that we need to be ready for. But I think it's for the good. For the longest time, those that are from the continent are even aware, they also developed the terrorists for fighting for freedom, for fighting for equality, for fighting for everything else. But it's true courage, not just for themselves, but by everyone that supported. And for the longest time, those that supported him and the freedom struggle in this part of the country were also labeled terrorists. Some people were killed for no apparent reason than just to think about whatever it was. So the short answer is yes, but there will be risks that we need to deal with. And it's also ensuring that those that are funding us or the way we are wasting our resources. It's also, if someone is conditioned the way they are giving you money because you don't support Palestine, then I don't think you need to take that money. We are better off all dead than having some of us dead. That's my view. Thank you.
I just wanted to add to what Jacob said about the risks. I think there are huge risks, and there are three that I want to mention in particular. Reputational damage, your own reputation, being isolated or excluded because the powers that be no longer find that what you say is palatable, that you might lose influence, so you might be removed from advisory roles or leadership, you might be shut out of decision-making spaces. And the third one is loss of funding. But I think to mitigate those risks, what you need to do is what I've already said about using evidence and facts to build backup positions, build alliances with trusted partners to swell the numbers, prepare for pushback from those institutions, as we mentioned, by anticipating and developing strategies to counter it, and then using clear, calm, strategic communication to speak to the issues of shared interest and to avoid escalation. And I say this not just to CCIVS as a group, but to the individual member organizations as well, because I think you all feel vulnerable, and it's a tough road. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to answer a closing word from Julian from Vishwas. Yeah, one thing, I'd like to ask you one thing that you wish international voluntary service organizations understood about doing colonial justice orientated practice or work.
Deep democracy. The oldest decolonial institution we have is the Commons. It's over 200,000 years old. It's defended and strengthened.
What do you guys say after this? I think I would just add that it requires a lot of listening and empathy also to each other for each other's diverse situations. This is a very complex world that we live in, and it requires collaboration. Again, collaboration is resilience. So thank you.
So on the original schedule, we had a few minutes to put Q&A from the floor. I would just love to see if in the Zoom room we've got any questions coming in the chat. And we have a question here on the floor, 1, 2, and 3, and I think that's probably all we'll have time for. Thank you.
My name is Rashid, representing the International Voluntary Service Great Britain. I listened to the panelists, and I was wondering, there is something I couldn't understand. Is we are talking about CCIVS to take the lead. But we know what the CCIVS is, it was ruled by UNESCO, part of United Nations. And some of the panelists was said that all the critical issues these organizations face, this CCIVS is part of that organization. So tomorrow, CCIVS doesn't exist because their funding comes. Support comes from the UNESCO. No. And so
there's no money from UNESCO.
I know. We pay European Union and so on. Now, for example, how are we going to take the stand if these organizations are tomorrow saying that we don't need CCIVS because we have got a different political agenda or different priorities, because Europe is now arguing for war with Russia because they all been threatened. China want to arm up the case because they want to be superpower. So in this situation, how we are going to move forward? I didn't hear this was from you. I know democratic organizations are there, but also I also think about leadership. Who is going to lead them? Because people cannot just organize themselves without leadership and brotherhood and sisterhood. So that's my questions or my query, because I was listening and listening. And I said that, who is leading this? And if this organization doesn't exist today, who is going to be taking the place? Because we know when League of Nations did not exist, that fascism rises in Europe. Today, you also mentioned that fascism is rising again, because these institutions are failing. And I agree with you 100%. Thank you.
Take them, I take.
So
I think 3 questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much for very interesting presentations, really very valuable information. My name is Ali, I come from Palestine. I think such symposiums and lectures and conventions should perhaps more be directed to states, rather than grassroots organizations. Although we all, and all the grassroots communities, let's say the scale of damage that they cause for the climate can be counted compared to what the states usually do. Like the mass destruction of the climate comes from the industrial countries and the whites, let's put it like that, the north, mostly the north. And through the wars, like for instance, now we're talking about Palestine, it will not be inhabited as perhaps in a few years due to well, Israel has bombarded Gaza with 200,000 tons of of explosions, where every gas and person share from this about 190 kilograms of explosives. So, I think the scale of damage that is done by these by governments is very much higher than any communities that could cause. So, what advices you could give us about this situation, like states, how we can really enforce or ask them to reduce the destruction of the climate?
Thank you so much for the informative presentation. I am learning some more from the issue. The first question goes to Professor Nadia. I think you really explained very well on how the scramble for Africa is leading to militarization, resource exploitation, green colonialism. And also you say something very important, that don't look up to the systems and the governments, but look up to yourself. So I think this is a bit of a challenge, because as we are talking about green colonialism, it is very hard, for example, if of course you know the picture is out there, that Africa is hungry and all that and all that. But at the same time, there are how do we call it? There are certain types of food systems that you cannot grow. Because when you grow, you're told, no, this one you cannot grow. This one can only be imported from certain country. And if you look at our countries, in our systems, and our weather systems, weather patterns, we can produce a lot. So this really, how do we do, how do we change this narrative? Because even if you try to do it for yourself, it's not possible. Because the system is more political, and there are things you cannot just challenge. The second question goes to Professor Martin, where he talked about aid that is sent to Africa, only 10% reaches the community. And I think how do we change this narrative? Because you will find that the media from the West are the ones that are talking about, these people have diseases, these people are coming and all that. And yet, they're the ones who are benefiting. You find that maybe 90% of the aid, or 10% what you're saying, is reaching. So this affects us negatively. How can the African media challenge this so that we can have a true picture of Africa that is, true?
I know we've already got time for that final question, but sorry. I'm shouting this. And I'm going to give each panelist just 30 seconds to respond. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But in the lunch break, there's the invitation to continue networking and continue sharing and asking questions. And I think these conversations are critical, and they don't finish together. And that's what we are here for the next 3 days of our conference together, to continue discussing and speaking about. So I'm happy to see the engagement. So I'll just pass the mic for quick response. Thank you.
So global management food systems are not going to work for us, the world we're going into. The alternative, the systemic alternative, is food sovereignty. We need to build it bottom up in our communities, villages, towns, and cities. And we need to join movements that are championing food sovereignty. That is the key in my view.
Yeah, I would support that absolutely, and I think the whole group from the bottom up is absolutely critical. We need to organize. With our organization, without the partnerships, we're not going to win this battle. And it's very, very tough. And there are huge risks, but we have to do it because our future is at stake.
Okay, the question will be you again. And it's part of the topic, the involvement in the system is very broken. We rather continue with the broken system, or perhaps completely break it and build something new. I think that's the challenge for you and I. She put the question around what we should do, that I think the virtual power of communities, not that it doesn't matter, she put it very eloquently. And I think that's why even, and even that is, however, broken the system is, that is imprinted in all what that was global development, chapter or things like that. I think that's how it should go, might be. Self-service is not a narrative, not a reality. More and more researchers are showing these things. In some cases, organizations that are located in the highest part of Pretoria, Erasmus in Nairobi, in the name of Africa, because these are a lot of global capitals. You find that a study we did in Nairobi local showed that over only 25% of resources generated in Nairobi in the name of NGOs and profits actually are spent in the country. The rest goes out. The US is the greatest recipient of money generated in Nairobi, and that's the single most. That tells you something. So more research, but the great role of advocacy in this regard.
On the leadership question, I think we have said that we believe that CCIVS is uniquely positioned to lead advocacy efforts. Of course, the risks are there, and I think Helen spoke about them very detailed and much detail, and also would like to take up the what you said about communication. Communication is key. How you communicate, with whom, who's your messenger again. I think these questions are really key, and we have seen, especially in the European Union, there is the questions: how can you bite the hand that feeds you? But we have no choice. We have to choose. We have to convince decision makers and also those that feed us that there needs to be a systemic change. We have to choose. Thank you.
For everyone, a huge thank you for this rich, fascinating and interesting and important conversation. On behalf of the organization, of all the members here and all of the people joining us online today, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to deeper diving into these important topics. Passing the floor to Vicky, Director.
Sorry. Thank you. I just want to thank you on behalf of CCIVS as a CCIVS Director, because it was really very valuable and really rich to hear what you were saying. I think you've given a lot of content to us, and it also made me very proud because I heard like what you're saying a lot. I mean, you do, you know, and we've done it for over 100 years. And yeah, we just need to try and direct those forces and become that way that really bring these things forward. And also this question around resistance, no resistance to the funders and what they want. We have always stood our ground. When we haven't believed in something, we haven't followed it. But that's also the case with the UN, the UNP, and the history in the past of the UNESCO. And I believe that, you know, we're a resistant network and we'll continue that path and we'll achieve what we want because we have that strength. And I believe.